This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, Secret Treasure Hunt Land. I want to wish you all very Merry Christmas and a Happy Holiday. I am Mark Starosciak, and I wanted to present to you my ideas around San Francisco. So I want to warn you, this is very in-depth, and I'm going to try to keep the commentaries just to what's necessary about this solve, and then maybe cut another one where I go more into depth and ideas and as to why. Okay, so again, just want to warn you, but I hope you enjoy this, and maybe while you're sitting at the couch enjoying some eggnog. This is bookend one, right? And we talked about this in other videos, and there's the idea that San Francisco and New York are bookends because I think JJP said that, and maybe Byron did. But in my opinion, like absolutely they are. Okay, so this is number one, and I'm also going to give you New York. So I'm going to give you the crown jewels here, and I hope you like it. I have high conviction around these ideas. Does that mean they're right? Who knows? To behind a box, hard to say. But nonetheless, from the research that I've done, like I really like these ideas. So I know you like yours too, and I'm not saying they're wrong. I want to give you something to chew on. All right, so let's dive right into it. Got to get my screen share here. All right, here we go. All right. So the starting point for this solve, I believe, is the Ferry Arch at Pier 43.5, Fisherman's Wharf. One of the big filters that we're using in San Francisco is the idea that it's featuring iconic parts of the city. I think all of these you could say that about is, when you think about Byron's like putting these together, he's not going to leave off, I don't think, like the things you think about when you think about these cities. So Fisherman's Wharf is one of those, and we'll show you the evidence. This might be like my single best clue in terms of certainty, high level of certainty. So I think the start, absolutely 100%, is Fisherman's Wharf at the Ferry Arch 43.5. So I'm going to show you that evidence here in a sec. So Golden Gate Park is only referenced in the image to let you know it's San Francisco. At no time does he ask you to enter it. I know this is the most blasphemous thing maybe I could ever say. And sadly, for those of you up in GGP, I'm going to make a case for why you should redirect your efforts. So I don't think he's up there for a variety of reasons, particularly if you buy into the idea that the Ferry Arch at 43.5 in Fisherman's Wharf, an iconic piece of the city, is the start. So the trek only briefly leaves the shoreline, sort of just like Boston. There's so many cool, good things on the shoreline. That speaks to like where we end up, which is near the bridge. Okay, I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag. Look in the background here. Like this is where we're at. We're up at the bridge. To me, it only makes sense, and GGP doesn't. So you go to the shoreline, but you only briefly leave it for what I think is pretty interesting little sidetrack. So we have lots of visuals, and I will admit, I've made a few trips out there. Like the first couples were bus, and we were close. Like conceptually, we had it right, but we didn't have the visuals. This is one where you must have the visuals. And once we started to find the spot, it was like, holy cow! Like, yeah, that to me confirmed it. So whether or not you like how we got there, like at the spot, I think you're gonna see it's great. Lots of visuals. So this location is at a battery. There's a lot of battery image in the painting. Okay. And yeah, it's like getting to know San Francisco. There's 50 batteries or something. There's a lot. And we spent a good amount of time at them. And they are super fascinating and interesting. By the way, New York has a lot of batteries. That one I don't think is at a battery, but it's damn close. So this one, we have a lot of things to support the idea that it's at a battery. Okay. So the stone-like spires in the image have a dual representation at the dig site, and there's a very important reference point in them. So the stone window at the top, it's not Alcatraz or some other window. So at our dig site, it is a very historical thing. All right. And it's not just some random thing. It's such a centerpiece, right? So in my opinion, if you're at the dig site, like you have to be able to see this thing. Like I don't know why it would be there if you can't. I just think it's a random. Hey, here's a hint, or here's this. It's this arch. It doesn't really mean much. It's such a centerpiece, sitting right up at top in the middle, and it when I show this to you, I think you'll agree that at least our arch has this level of relevance to it that one would see in sort of represented in the picture. So the casque is buried in an elevated position. Like when you look at the pearl, it's showing a shadow and elevated. We'll get into that. And below it, I think, is the trail. So that is, at our site. And that's why we like it. So the image of Earth ultimately leads you into the Presidio. Now, somebody's saying, it's not in a national park. Show me where it says it's not a national park. It says it's in a public park. This, only became a national park in like 72. Nixon signed it. And, but, things were just so much more wild back then. You could walk in anywhere and sort of do anything. So it's different today, folks. It's different. But we think there's just a ton of evidence that supports the Presidio. Okay, so like the New York solve, though, to get there, you kind of have to use the image and you have to invert it. And I think that in and of itself is a very risky operation. It's like, are you doing it at the right time? And is it even the right thing to do? So I think that does add some element of uncertainty or risk. But in terms of actually solving San Francisco, you do have to do that. Upside down inversions, and New York is the same way. So that, in our mind, is like, oh, okay, if you do the same operation to get there, between these, which are, I believe, are bookends very, very strongly, then yeah, that supports the idea, supports both. All right. So unfortunately, the dig site near the bridge, it's been worked on extensively, like versus some of the other solves where there's been some natural change to the landscape, like St. Aug and Charleston as an example. Like I don't think there's been any natural disasters or storms, things like that would disturb this area. But the human work, good luck. Like, so I don't think this one, I think there's a very strong likelihood it's not available for this reason, is there's been so much work done in this spot. But, that remains to be seen. So if you happen to find the SF box using this solve, please give me props and invite me and my girls to the ceremony, okay? All right, so where the hell is this thing? So I got to come out of the Brizo. So, this is the image. So I know some people don't like when you play with the coloring and all that, but I think you have to. I think you have to do that to bring out what's there, because we don't have the actual image. We don't have the painting in front of us. And so we can't see those intricate details. So I took this one and I just lightened it up a little bit to see, because clearly on the side of the image here, you can see there's something going on. And I think that's a great match to the shoreline. Okay, it's kind of subtle, but you've got this little white part sticking out. I think this is the yacht club. Okay, but this is the shoreline, and then that would make this line going through the middle of the image. That's the bridge. Okay, so it's stylized a bit. It's not exact, but I think it's damn close. It's close enough for me. So big picture, the fingers are pointing. Things are pointing to the box. Okay, in this instance, I think the fingers are serving a dual purpose. I think they're pointing both to the start and finish. So if I just sort of follow this index finger, it's pointing down here near the bridge. Okay, it's not pointing. She's not pointing to GGP. So if this is indeed a map of the shoreline, it's telling you like you should be in this area. So that's, to us, like it confirms like we should be moving up the shoreline from Fisherman's Wharf and ultimately ending up at the bridge. All right, so the start, like where's the start? And again, all of these puzzles, he gives you a very clear idea of where to start. Like I think if there's any hints and clues that you can rely on, it's kind of the start, right? He wants you to like get off on the right foot, Because if you start in the wrong place, like you'll never, ever, ever get there. So he makes these kind of obvious. And I don't know if anyone has this, I apologize. I have not seen it. So when I am talking about ideas and that, like Laura was down in Anastasia, like nearby where I think it is in St. Aug, like I'm gonna give you props, okay? But if I haven't seen it, it's out there. Apologies. So fingers, we talked about this before, hands, objects pointing to where the box is or the start. So in this instance, I'm doing a little math. I'm saying like, well, how many of these blocks are there in the cuffs? And there's like 38, maybe 39. It's a little hard to see. But guess where Fisherman's Wharf starts? It starts like pure 38, 39. So this is like, for us, another piece of evidence that the start is Fisherman's Wharf. Okay, so also gotta look closely. She is clearly pointing to the fourth block here and in between the third and the fourth block, and there's something under her fingernail here. You don't see that under her fingernail here. So like this little notch, we'll zoom in on that. Like what is that? It's the fairy arch, folks. So I have some very direct evidence here. Fingers pointing, and JJP mentioned this thing in Boston. It's like stuff is pointing. It only makes sense. They're trying to get you close. Like they want this solved, okay? And so they've got to give you some hints pointing in direction. So if you're not on that, that is part of your filter. I think you got to reconsider and start looking at hands, feet, things that look out of place that, kind of pointing and directing. And like your solve should match up with that. So I think this is as clear of evidence as you can get, right? And so this is my start. And from here now, I must launch myself and things must fall into place. Okay, if they stop falling into place, I think it's wrong. So 2, I'll come into this, the clock hands. This has a clock. The fingers and the clock hands are pointing to the box. So in this instance, like this area, I'm cutting ahead a little bit. This is the area right near the bridge, and I'll show you that. So you have clock hands as well, kind of pointing in that direction. All right. So we are at Stonewall's door. This is the fairy arch. Okay. Let this sink in. Does this look like a Stonewall's door? Like it does to me. She's pointing at 43 and a half. This is at 43 and a half. Like how many piers do you use a half? Okay. So hopefully I don't have to do too much convincing of you on this, that this is the start. Okay. So here's the arch. Like if you zoom in, this is an overhead of the arch. It's kind of notched like, so go ahead, pull it up on Google, and you'll see that's kind of what it looks like from the air. I don't know. Like if you want to debate me on this, you can, but I'm not going to budge on this. I'm just not going to budge on this one. All right. So the air smells sweet, not far away, 3 post high. So I think people have this. Gardelli, you see the G. I'm not going to debate this like the Great Highway. No. Like this is too obvious to me. Like I'm going to go with the obvious answer unless I've got really, really compelling reason to not. This thing was so hard to begin with. Like you didn't need to overcomplicate it. And so if I'm starting at the fairy arch and I'm moving up, this all makes sense, doesn't it? So go with it. That's my thing. So I think people have this clearly. I mean, when you're standing here on this street, and I can't remember what street it is, you see the post, you see Alcatraz in the background. Done deal. Like that's just too obvious, right? So I don't think we need to debate much on that. So the next clue is sounds from the sky. And if you're down there at all, there's so much fog all the time. It's like, what is the most obvious sound from the sky? It's the foghorns, right? This is, again, an iconic piece of San Francisco. I don't know where else you hear this in America. Like, there probably is. Clearly not in as big of a city and widely known. So why wouldn't it be the foghorns, right? And so I have this on here. Like, I mean, I know you guys know what foghorns sound like, but okay, like, do you need more proof than that? So I'm near the shoreline. You hear this all the time down there. And maybe if you're a citizen, you just get used to it. But as a visitor, like, you can't deny this. Now, yeah, there's some, other sounds in that going on, but I don't think anywhere near kind of what you hear from the foghorns. All right, so let's just pause for a moment. So I think you head up to Chrissy Field, all right, and let that cat out of the bag. Let's just look at the map for a second. Okay, so let's say you're on board with the fairy arch, and there it is, right? It looks like the chip underneath her fingernail. This is important. It is really important. As much as you might like GGP and you see the outline of the park, and I do think that's the outline of the park, but I think that's there as information. It's to let you know, hey, you're in San Francisco. If I'm starting here, what do I need to do? And okay, maybe you're on the Ghirardelli. If you're not, I just that's just too obvious. So this walk here it might look far. It's not, right? It's like 4 or 5 blocks. And it's really cool, all these restaurants, and speaks to the idea this is an iconic piece of San Francisco. So if you aren't starting here and I'm giving you a fairy arch, you're not starting down here. I hate to say you're wrong, but I think you're wrong. So now I'm starting here. I'm on my journey. It's super important. So here I go. I'm going bing, bing, bing right up here. And here's Ghirardelli. All right. And then this is that street that you look and you see that historic ship, and then Alcatraz in the background. All right. So now if I'm in GGP, if you say, hey, I believe you on that, look at how far GGP is. This is where we're at, right here. Now all of a sudden, I'm going to go from Ghirardelli and make this huge left-hand turn into the city just to get to the corner of the park. Here's 3.6 miles, folks. I'm not buying into that. I just don't think GGP is it for a variety of reasons. And we can get into that. But just structurally, my journey started here, and I go to these like 2 cool places, and then I cut like through the middle. So there's basically nothing. And then I end up in this park. And by the way, to get to the other side over here is 7 miles. 7 miles to get to the beach. It doesn't seem practical to me. So by the way, you can't see anything from GGP. If you're up on Strawberry Hill, you can kind of see some views of the city up there if you go on Google Maps. But like there's a lot of trees and stuff. You can't really see that well. It's not like you'd say, oh, let's go up to Strawberry Hill in GGP and then see this wonderful view of the city. You just don't see it. So like, I'm not up here. I don't think that makes sense. But what makes sense is to continue the journey along the shoreline. Okay? So do I have you? Like, does that just philosophically make sense? If it does, follow me on the journey. So from here, the next clue is sounds in the sky, aces high. We talked about this. You follow the shoreline. I don't think you would hear the foghorns way up there. All right, aces high. So I'm giving you here Chrissy Field. Okay. So back in the late 70s and 80s, this was an operating airport. Okay. And today it's just, it's a field. It's just a field. And I think people aren't really looking at it as an airport. Certainly not a military airport. And that's what it was, folks. It was a military airport named after a very famous military pilot, Dana Chrissy. Now, I think he died in a airplane accident, like in Ohio or something. But when I hear ace, like ace could be a number of things. Ace is a military pilot, is it not? Okay, so I'm not going much further than that. I've got a reference to a military pilot, and I've got a military airfield literally just up the road. So here's Ghirardelli right here, and now I move up the shoreline, this beautiful shoreline. And some people stop here. I forget the name. It's Maritime Park or something like that, and they're trying to dig in there. This thing here, that doesn't make much sense to me. And some people are over here at the Pearl. This Pearl, like this, had me tripped up for a long time. And I'm like, oh, this is the underneath the neckline and all that. And so yeah, it definitely looks like a pearl, but there's much more to accomplish, I think, in the puzzle in that. So these are not the starting points. So Chrissy Field starts right here. So this is like, I don't know, it's like a mile or so from Ghirardelli up the shoreline to Chrissy Field. Okay, so that's where I'm at. this is the next stop. To me, it adds up. It's obvious, and it's not a stretch. So I think this is the next leg in the journey. Now, again, like from here, if you buy into that, now all of a sudden, if you're still on GGP, you're going to go from Crissy Field, again, make this big move up through the city and end up here, and you're kind of out of puzzle, right? So I just think GGP is not it, folks, and I'm sorry about that. I know you've all put a lot of time and effort into it, but I'm not there. I'm following the shoreline. Okay. So that's where we're at. We're up at Crissy now. So what is the next step? So running north, but first across in Jules' direction, object of Twain's attention. And this is one where, yeah, I think you got to do a lot of homework to get it. I think, too, the words he uses are very important, super duper important, because there are so few of them. He had to be very selective in the words he uses. And this is extremely important in this clue, my opinion. So we say running north. What runs north? Highways, right? I guess people run, but we say, hey, that highway runs north or it runs south. So I think he is referencing the 101 here. So, if you're following, the 101 and going to head north, he's saying, do that, but first you got to cut across. So, sorry. So this is an old picture of Crissy Field, and this is when the 101 was being constructed. So here I am at Crissy Field, and he's telling me I got to cut across it, I think. And this is where I'm not as comfortable. So in Jules' direction, so this doesn't negate our solve, but it's a little funky in the sense that you're kind of diverting off the shoreline. So my question is like, is there something that's the object of Twain's attention? As it turns out, there is. So if I say hey, I got to cut under the freeway now, and I understand why he did this, if this is indeed right, is there's an object of Twain's attention like right here. So this is actually the National Cemetery. And so you start at the first thing I do when I see Twain, like it's Mark Twain, right? I don't think there's any debate on that. Like, what were some of those things that Twain was up to and doing when he was in San Francisco? So I'm going to look at all those different stories. I'm going to ask myself, which of these might Byron have referenced? And I know you all have all these, seemingly they seem fairly complex connections to Twain. And so, like, maybe, I don't know. But I know in this instance, I'm moving up the shoreline, and I'm trying to get to the bridge. I'm trying to get to a battery, okay? And so is there something along the way that would grab Twain's attention? Attention, I think that word is very important as well. So, yes, it's right up here at the cemetery. And what's up at the cemetery? So, again, I'm trying to cover a lot of bases here, but an object, right? That's not a house. When I hear the word object or see the word object, I think it's a smaller thing, right? I wouldn't describe the Golden Gate Bridge as an object, okay? So it's a smaller thing. So what is up in this cemetery that might be of Twain's attention? Some of you might argue, you're not in the cemetery. I don't know. I don't think he ever says he's not buried there. But Twain, one of the marquee things that happened while he was in San Francisco, and as part of the history of San Francisco, is General Funston. General Funston, without getting too deep, you can look him up. He's all over the place in San Francisco. So there's a park named after him, and he was up in the Presidio. But Twain and he had like a battle, okay? So this was like one of the marquee things that happened between he and Funston. So when I publish this back, you can read it. But basically, Twain wrote this piece completely lampooning Funston. And at some point, they thought Funston could be a running mate for Teddy Roosevelt. Now, I love Teddy Roosevelt. Byron seemingly did too, because Teddy's all over these puzzles, okay? But I think that's an interesting connection. So he wrote this piece lampooning Funston, and it destroyed his reputation. Like, it knocked him way down from this very revered general to like a nobody almost. So like I think that's a big deal. So anyway, this is small. This is my picture. I went and visited the grave marker. So I think this is the object of his attention. I want to give props to my buddy Kurt, who worked on these. He found this. Okay, so what I found, I don't know, but I think this is really compelling because I crossed the 101. I first cut across what heads north eventually to this area. Okay, so I think again, general. You think of standing at attention, don't you? You salute a general while you're standing at attention. So I think that word attention is very important. It has a military connotation to it, does it not? I don't think that's a stretch. And it's close by. Okay, so you can read in the history of all that, but yeah, I think this is the object. So he's saying like, continue north, but first, take this stop. All right. Are you with me? Are you with me? We're heading north. So this is the view. Again, this is my picture. It is the most incredible cemetery I've ever been to. It's so like, would I want to be buried there? 1,000%. Like, I'd want to be here. It is dramatic, and it's moving. And like, would he want to stop here? Like, absolutely would. So, is this I don't think so. Like, I think this is it. I think this is the object of the attention is the grave marker. Okay, so I got to come out of this. So let's kind of like jump a little bit closer into the image. So when I first look at the image, I see, and maybe you do too, an arrowhead. That's like the first thing when I look at the outline, right? This to me, like it just speaks of an arrowhead. I thought it was pointing up here to Alcatraz or across the bridge or something like that, but this is an arrowhead, right? I think. So when you lay that over the image inverted, it is the national park symbol. Now, is this something just happens to be a coincidence? Maybe. But my sort of very naive thinking when I first start looking at these is, yeah, that's an arrowhead. So it matches the fact that the national park symbol is an arrowhead. I think that's interesting. Is it absolutely necessary? No. But I look at it and say, yeah, that's something that leads me into the national park. Again, I'm not going to debate whether it's there. Like, there's no national parks. I think it is. This was a relatively new thing. It was like 8 years in the making. So Nixon, again, established it. And it's huge, right? It includes Alcatraz, the headlands across the river, across the bay. It's like 82,000 square feet. It's massive, okay? So this would have been new. But to think about, like, when I show you the area that I think we're in, it's all manicured and fixed up and all that. But back then, you look at these old pictures, like it wasn't. It was wild. It was like dirt trails, and you could go in there and do anything you wanted at all times. And I'm guessing there's no one patrolling. There is now. There's like bike patrol. All right. So in any case, so now we're, you got to invert the image, and that people see this, right? So this matches like really closely, but you got to invert her to get it just lined up, right? Okay. So when I see this symbol, I'm like, yeah, national park. So now let's talk about the Presidio. And here's where, I'm gonna fight you on GDP. So if you believe this is about Chinese immigrants, like what was naturally in my mind, it's like what was going on with Chinese immigrants in and around San Francisco. Obviously, we know Chinatown, all that. I didn't know this, and so like score one for Byron. This is what he wanted. He wanted you to like sink your teeth into this and research. So when it comes to the Chinese in San Francisco, the 1906 earthquake and big fire displaced all of them. And there was something like 15, and there's different numbers out there, 20,000, 25,000 Chinese in San Francisco. And again, without getting too deep into it, when the fire happened, all that, there were all these refugee camps, or 26 refugee camps, 21 were run by the army. And those were spread out, in the city, but primarily in the Presidio and in GGP. Okay, so this is what it looked like, folks. This is what it looked like. You can see, like, this is an actual Chinese camp. But this is what they set up in the Presidio and GGP. Now, in terms of like where did the Chinese go? Yeah, like you can imagine all of the discrimination that they faced, like had to be enormous, and it was. So when the fire and all that happened, the earthquake, they wanted to commandeer, with some wanted to take Chinatown over and push the Chinese to Hunter's Point. And now I didn't look up where Hunter's Point is, but supposedly it certainly wasn't as nice. So they saw like, here's our chance, right? So the same thing like in Maui is what they're afraid of. With all the fires there, it's like all the locals get pushed out and like all the big money comes in. So that was a problem. And read about it, it's really interesting. But this is what was set up there. So I'm zoomed in on the the dragon at this point. And I don't see people every time. They think, oh, these are just scales. But when you really look closely, like they're not uniform. Like they seemingly are representing something. I think it's this. Like I think it's this historical event. And then when I asked myself, well, where were the Chinese? Like the authorities, huddled them all into the Presidio, in like the far west side of the Presidio, not in GGP. All right. So again, if you say, well, I still think GGP, and I say, well, this represents this massively historical event, 1906 earthquake in San Francisco, and then what happened in those parks. You could say, well, yeah, they set these things up in GGP as well, but the Chinese weren't up in GGP; they were in the Presidio. Okay, so does that matter? Maybe not to you, but to me it does. It tells you should be in the Presidio. This is Chinese. So how would you argue that if all the Chinese were known to have been pushed into the Presidio, probably against their will, and not up in GGP, why would you argue GGP, right? So if you don't if you don't buy into this logic, then you're sort of throwing away the whole idea of immigrants and the history, aren't you? So I hate to say this, but yeah, like GGP is I wouldn't be in GGP at all. I just wouldn't. Even if I'm proven wrong here, I just don't think it's the right place for a variety of reasons. This is one of the big ones, okay? This is one of the big ones. So as you start to go into this, into the image, you'll see like, yeah, these kind of look just like this. So I think this is one of the best answers to the dragon. Okay, let's get into the battery idea. So are you with me? Are you with me on this? I hope so. I hope you're having fun. This is fun. This is a lot of fun. So in going through all these batteries, spend a lot of time on, take all these pictures and you see all this imagery. And that's what I think all of these around the outside are here. Around the outside. So I think a lot of this has to do, like here, this one, artillery, right? You see the X here and this sideways triangle represented here, maybe. But to me, this one up here, so you can go and look at different military symbolism, and I think that's what it's saying. And I don't think it's a stretch to say, well, these are sort of around the city, and the batteries are all around the city. So from my perspective, I think he's telling you here, battery. And that really kind of shaped a lot of how we ended up where we're at. So we were at a couple other batteries initially. So sort of conceptually, I think we were right, but just at the wrong one. So the one near the bridge is called Battery Lancaster. Well, there's several, like right by the bridge. But I think the one we're at is Battery Lancaster. So if you go and investigate this imagery, you'll see it matches up to this. So that's why we like battery. This is a schematic of Battery Lancaster. So the Battery Lancaster is right at Golden Gate Point. Okay, it's right at the visitor center. And it looks virtually nothing like this today. I think this is the only one kind of really left. But it's, I think the road is right here over this one, and this one is sort of down. When you look at the schematic, you see it's, kind of moves down. But what I wanted to show you in this one was the eyes. Like, I think the eyes represent the turrets in the batteries, okay? So they have this rounded shape and they're angled. So, I think this is the representation of the eyeball here. So I think that's what you're seeing. And we can go in and debate this. Maybe you're just seeing things, but there's so many of these around. I think a previous slide indicates batteries. But, you start to ask yourself, these eyes, what are they? So in the course of investigating everything, I'm looking at all these schematics, all the different batteries, trying to figure out which one. They look like these eyes. So the other thing, and I'll get into this, there's this little red dot in the corner of the eye of one and not in the other, similar to the fairy arch underneath the fingernail. So you've got to have a good answer for that. And so in my opinion, if this represents the batteries kind of where you should be, this red dot needs an explanation. Now maybe it's gone, whatever that clue was, but it's not over here, it's over here. So I don't think that's random, right? In any case, I just wanted to show you how closely the eyes sort of match the shape of the batteries. And so that's how we get at the batteries here. That's how we get to the batteries. Okay, now this is, I gotta come out. So this is where now it's a little flimsy, I think, if there's a flimsy part. But at this stage, like there's hardly anything left, and I'm up in the cemetery, right? And that's up here. So I think at this point, you must use the image to get you there. So now you're in the Presidio. Okay, this is in the Presidio. What do you do? The short answer is when you start to look at all the roads in that inside of the Presidio, they have this very scale-like look to them. So yeah, I think like what he's showing you in this dragon, even though the image is GGP or the outline, like the roads and how this looks matches far better to me the scales represented in that dragon. So now I think you use the roads and you work your way down to the dig site. So that's where I'm at on this and this is where maybe this is a leap. But okay, look, if I'm at Chrissy and then I jump over to Funston, like maybe Funston isn't right and you just like continue along the shoreline. I couldn't find really much that I would argue connects Twain to that shoreline. Okay, so like maybe I'm reaching here, but then if I'm up at Chrissy, if you like that, then where do you go? Like I would think the natural place to the bridge at a battery. So I'm trying to get my way to a battery, right? That's all I'm telling you here. And we can debate this, but this is probably if there's an area I'm not as comfortable with in the solve, like this is it. Yet ultimately you'll see the imagery at what I think is the right spot is pretty convincing. All right, so here we are. If I overlay now what I think is representing taking the roads to the dig spot. Here it is, and this could be wrong. I could have it inverted wrong, or I could have it upside down. It should be the other way. But I sort of like this angle. So ultimately, this last clue, I think, is when you're right at the dig spot. To get down there, though, you've got to go through the Presidio using these like really curvy roads where undoubtedly in these fields and that you would have seen the tents and all that set up. All right, so here it is. I'm just matching it up as best I can. And there's this rounded area of the cemetery. And now, yeah, I jump on these roads. And if you've driven these roads, and I did a lot when I was there, they're like really twisty and windy. And they wind all the way through. So as it turns out, the dragon is sort of eating the spot. Now, I like that. Is that super important to get down there? I don't think so. But it's like sort of nice confirmation if you're on the solve. So the other thing too is these crossover hands. That's really the toll area. So you'll see that lines up very well. So here's the hands, right, that people think is that crossover road in GGP, and I get that. That's kind of a good match, but it also is a great match to zoom in here a little more to the toll area, right? So if I had this overlaid correctly, it's right there. So the hands sort of overlay. Is that absolutely necessary? No, I don't think it is, but it does explain sort of this, if indeed this is right. So the other thing I will point you out is this C and B over here does show up when you look in the Google Maps, like right here. There's these two little parks that you notice like are very much the claws. So I think that's another reason that this is probably right. They're not exactly sitting on it, but dang close, and you'll see that. So go into the maps. You got to play with it a little bit, but these are like 2 parks in the residential area, like right here. Okay, so are you with me on this still? Like, this is where I'm at. So I'm getting down these batteries, and I will say that we thought you followed this straight down this way, but you would never have continued north. And down here is Battery Chamberlain, Battery Crosby. So that is where I can tell you some failed attempts were made. And I guarantee you they're not there based on the activity that we conducted. They're not there. Even though it's real spectacular from there, the big problem I had with Chamberlain and Crosby, and then I also went up China Beach, it's too far away from everything, and you don't get the imagery like you do in this spot. Okay. All right, so let's move along. So I want to just jump into, the rose, right? So the rose, to me, represents the area right near the dig site, which is right next to the bridge. And again, I've got this clock hand, and it's not pointing due north, right? It's kind of angled off a little bit. And so if you follow that up, it's pointing to the dig site. So basically, I blew it up here. This is what I think is a battery. The shape is very close, and these are the trails going around, sort of up elevated. And down here is the road that swings around that leads to Fort Point, and this is that point. So I like this. Like, I like this connection. Is it exact? No, certainly not. But let's just zoom in here just for a sec. So if I overlay this, and like I can thank Google, but this is a really good fit. Now, is it exact? No, it's sort of stylized, but I've got the road running here in this nub, okay, and then I've got all this going on in here. It's sort of like, it is kind of circular, and then I've got the batteries up here. So, is that a match? Like, this is the trail, and it sort of splits, and then, yeah, like that's the way this area looks. So let me just show you that again. I like this. Okay, so it fits. Like, I don't think this is a stretch. Maybe in your mind it is, but like, I know the hands point to the box, the clock hands at least, and like, it's right there. It's pointing like to this area. So this is a good one for you. So ultimately, you get right here next to the bridge, and let me show you that. So you ever wonder what those spires in the back are? So I can tell you, this was my watershed moment. Okay, my watershed moment was like, what the hell are these things? And I floated that out there at one point, like, what are these, and what's that window and that? And people have different ideas about it. When I went to Google Earth, Google Maps, and I'm walking around this battery now, and I see these pieces to the bridge, I'm sold. I can tell you, I'm sold. Now, maybe that's the death knell. But in my opinion, whereas when I'm at Crosby and Chamberlain as batteries, I don't have any of that imagery. Like, I look far off in the distance, I see the headlands. It just doesn't fit. When I look at these, they're stone structures, but they have this organic look to them. So, yeah, folks, like, I'm sold, okay, on this spot. And this is a big reason why. Now, this is someone else's picture. It's more clear. So now there's actually a telephone pole where they've run electricity, so it sort of interferes with the view. And they've also added this, jumping platform down here that people want to jump, right? So it's a safety thing, and you'll see that they were still constructing it. So it's murkier now, this view, and that's why I wanted to show you this one. So let's look at this. Like, this is the most exciting part, in my opinion. I got to back out of this because this gives me the imagery. Okay, I got to show you this. Like, I got a few slides on this. So I hope you're not too bored. And sorry for making this longer, but there's so much to this. So I was just overlaying this imagery, and I want to show you, like, there's 4 posts, right? And we'll get into what actually this is. So this is part of the bridge, but it wasn't actually necessary. Just looking at it, I wouldn't know this, and that's why I think this makes sense to me, because it's a very historical part of the bridge, as it turns out. So just, for a moment, grant me this. like I'm seeing kind of like 4 major structures in the imagery. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then this one way in the background. We'll cover that too. But I got 4 here, don't I? And now there's some other small ones that are in the background. I think he did that just to not make it so obvious. But look at these, and I'm going to zoom in on them. Like from my sight, this is what you see. And so I think that's what these things are. Now, the layering in the background of the image on these, it does look very similar to the bridge as well. Now, I could go on and just show you that forever, but I want you to go and look at the structure of the Golden Gate Bridge and how it has the steel is layered. And it looks very similar to all that imagery you see in the background as well. So anyway, this is a big one for me. Like this was like, hey, I know I'm in the right spot. When I see these stone structures, like what are they? Now, ultimately, you have to turn the image on its side and you pick up all this other imagery around this area, which of course I will show you. So let's just zoom in closely on these. I wanted to show you, like, this is that, like, as you're in the dig spot, it's the far left and then the next one. And again, it's a little, right, because they're building and putting all this, these safety nets down here now. So it's I can't see quite as well. But, look at how closely, to me, like, that explains these things. So I think the genius of this and why I like this area, you finish, like, on the shoreline still, near what might arguably be the most iconic bridge in the world. Okay? Ask 7 billion people on the planet, like maybe half of them know the Golden Gate Bridge. It's so associated to San Francisco. How does your solve not involve the bridge? I can't make that leap. Like, I have to have the bridge. And so the genius, I think, of these puzzles is he's able to represent something but not give it away. Unless you're like right there at the spot. That's genius to me. He's got the bridge in here, a very important element of it, as we'll talk about, but he's not giving it away because nobody is like thinking about the bridge. They're all up in GGP. All right, I'm at the bridge. So this is my imagery at the dig site. I see it. All right. So this is like the last one. I just wanted to superimpose, the one that fit. Like this is the far left one. And then superimpose that on. That's a fit. It's a fit. So as you can tell, I'm excited about this site because I have the imagery at the dig site, and it's the bridge, and it makes sense. It's up the shoreline. All right. Now the portico. This is another thing. I think this is a centerpiece, and it's not random. So what is that? Well, when I look through this stuff, and now fortunately when I was there in September, it was the most glorious day. It was calm, and you can see like not a cloud in the sky. You could see forever. And the previous times I've been there, stormy, rainy, cold. This was summer. I mean, it was like 80. It was this perfect day. And now all of a sudden, when you're looking through these, you see this little portico up here. So I think there's a dual meaning here, frankly. I think when he's looking at pictures of this site and trying to represent it, he sees that up there. But I do think it's a dual meaning. So it's fascinating, right? It's like it's way up and it's way off in the distance, just like the image. So why, if you're up in GGP, like what is this stuff to you? I don't know, but I know in this spot, it's like this is what you see. There's not a stretch, like it's sitting up there. All right, so what is? So I had to actually go up there. So this is actually called Construction 129. It's an unfinished battery. Now, I had to go up there to see, like, what does this thing look like? Because he's representing this. Does this have some big historical significance? And it basically doesn't. So if you read this here, I'll let you, look at it. But it doesn't have the elements of what he's showing in the image. So I had to like sort of dispel that. So I do think it represents the arch under the bridge for good reason. But real quickly, this is like a scene out of Star Wars. Like you have to go up there. If you live in the city particularly and you haven't gone up here, go up here. It's freaking awesome. So I had to show you this next one. This is on the other side. So you walk through one tunnel and then it opens up and you see down and then you walk through another one. It's like something out of a movie. But this is on the other side. It's this massive turret, and they were going to put like a 1,000,000-pound gun or something, which they never did. So I've got like tons of pictures and video from up here. It's really cool. I don't know what to say. Like, go and see it. All right, I had to give you that one. All right, so now we're getting to the heart of it. Like, why this spot too? By the way, I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag. New York, exactly the same. And again, I'll give you more detail on that. But so here we are. This portico sitting off in the distance. So underneath the bridge is this fort. It's called Fort Point, and they were going to tear it down. You can read this here while I'm talking. This is like a really historical, significant piece of Americana they wanted to save. It was Strauss that came up with putting this arch. So the arch that you see, that wasn't necessary. It's not on the other side. It was necessary to save the fort, which they said was the finest example of Mason's art. So now, if I look very closely at this, it looks like this is what he's trying to represent. So there's a massive historical meaning to the portico as presented in the image, if this is the right spot, I think. So is it a stretch? Maybe, but gosh, like, I know the portico for real doesn't look like this. So what is it? Well, from my dig spot, this is the next like big arch, and it happens to have this like massive historical meaning to it. So if you turn this upside down, like maybe this part here, which is very stone-like these, you don't see the like the different bricks, so to speak, or different blocks. Here you do. So I think if you turn this upside down, which I did, and we could spend all day on this, but I think this might be the fort under here, kind of. And this is the arch, right? It's flat, and then it's got a curve. So I don't know, maybe not. But yeah, at least in my spot, I have this massively historical imagery that I think fits, okay? So look into this. But again, when you talk New York, if this is the right place, you should have something similar on the New York side. And I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. Like, you do. It's a mirror image. And I will say, too, like, I solved this one, and then I went to Charleston and Roanoke and all these other ones, and then to New York. So I had no idea this bookend idea existed. But I come to and solve those independently, and then this whole bookend idea, and it's like, yeah, they're mirror images, folks. So my solve, I think, is it might be the best solve we have in New York in terms of all the supporting evidence. Even here, I think strong. But when you put those two together and they match, to me, that adds certainty. Okay. So this is the image. Like, this is right from dig site. This is how it looks. What's your imagery up in GGP? Like, it's not like this. Oh, and by the way, when you turn your head, this is the view, which would be is that south, towards the city, right? Keep this in mind for New York when I show you that. So you see this incredible view of the skyline from this site, right? This is what I'm looking at, the fort underneath this absolutely iconic bridge. Why wouldn't it be here? Like, anyway. All right, so now we're in the site. Where exactly in the site? I'm going to show you that. So when you look at the image, all right, I think what you're seeing specifically, right? These are batteries. I made a case for that. It's underneath a battery on a trail, and there's something underneath it. Now, when you start to really look closely at these images, I think you have to do, this is not proportional. It flattens out. It's rounded here and flattens out. So that to me is a hint. Like, if this was just representing a garment with a neckline, it would be proportional, I think. But this one is not. It flattens out. So what I'm doing now is I'm looking for a trail or a road, something that matches this shape. Because I think right near that then is the gem. So is there a shape like this down there near the bridge? So I'm looking at all the different trails and then I'm trying to look at old maps. Two, which I think is really important, This is elevated. It's showing it raised up at least, right? And it's a shadow is being cast underneath it. So in my spot, like is the target spot, is it elevated above a trail? Like if it's not, then how do I explain the floating pearl? If it is elevated, like I got it, I think, or I got a good answer. So this is the spot. Let me show that to you. So when I overlay and I try to match that neckline, I'm going to zoom way in here. So I try to match this neckline. I do have to reverse the image, which speaks to, like, at the end here, I think you got to do that. This is the best fit I can find, is this trail right here. Like, it's not this one. It's not any of these other ones. And this is an older picture. This is before the visitor center was built. So this is pre, like, 2011 or so. So it's very hard when you go to historic aerials. The imagery sucks around here. It does. So you really, like, I have a ton of old pictures. Like, I spent a ton of time trying to find aerials and stuff that would show me this area back in the 1980s. And it's hard. I'm going to tell you. I think that's part of the challenge here. So anyway, I grabbed this one because it's the oldest one I could find with the best representation of the trail before all this major work was done. All right, so I want you to just see the angle and how it matches. Right? I think that's like really, really close, like spot on. So I like this trail down by the bridge where I think it's pointing and leading to. So that's why I'm here, folks. That's why I'm here. I'm not up in GGB. I'm here. So let me just walk you through this. I'm happy to show you this or do a live session or something, walk you through all my stuff. But this, trail here, man. Now the question is if I look at where the gem is in relation, it's here. Now, is this an elevated area? If it's not, I'm not that interested. And so I don't think this is a good match. So, right? So it's kind of like sitting like right up in here. Also, the eyes, right? If we look at the eyes, like, are the batteries up here? If I match this, and it turns out they are. Like, these are the batteries right here. Is it exact? Like, I don't know if I got all the proportions right, but these are the batteries here. One, I think there's one over here, and then maybe one down here. This could be the third. It's hard to say. You really can't see these very well at all. But, when I overlay the image on the map, are those eyes, which I told you I think are turrets, are they in the right spot? And lo and behold, they are. Like, here are the eyes, which I think are the turrets. Those are right here. So it fits to me. All right. So let's look at the next one. So this is that trail now. Now this trail has been improved significantly. All right. It was all dirt back in the 80s. I'm going to show you some other imagery at the end of this area and why this is so hard. So this area has been worked on extensively. It has changed, I don't know, at least a half dozen times majorly. So again, elevated pearl below, this is right below that spot. It goes up like maybe 10, 12 feet. Okay, so it's elevated. So I like that. Like, to me, this works. It's not a stretch. I knew I needed an elevated dig site going into it. And where I can find the best trail fit, it's elevated, not just a little bit. It's way up there, as you can tell. I'm just showing you what I see. I like this. I like this match. So the other thing I'd mentioned before was the eyes, right? So when you start to look at these, if they're turrets, I think they are, there's this little red dot here. So do you have an explanation for that in yourself? Like, what is that? It's not random. This one, you don't have it. So it's not just like a mirror image of each other. This one is clearly different. So the fascinating thing about this site is we have an explanation for it here. All right, so I overlaid this as closely as I could to what's there today. And notice this little red dot. I'm going to show you what that is, but it's there. It's there in these eyes, folks. Trust your line eyes. So here's the eyeball. Here's the inside of the eye. Like, I don't know. Is it a stretch? Like, I don't think so, because I'm overlaying the image right here, right on my dig site, and then I'm matching up the turret to the eye, and there's this red dot. Well, that's a staircase. They certainly added, but it's there. It's there today. So this is it. This is that staircase. Like, I'm giving you the best I got. Like, I can't do any better than this. So these are just all, like I tell you, all this confirming imagery that we have at this site. Does yours? Do you have this sort of, easy fit? If you don't, I don't know. Like, I like this. I like this idea. Okay, so I'm gonna show you some other things. Yeah, so this is the target spot. So this is from Google Earth today, or Google Maps. So this is a target spot. So these trails, all this has been reworked, folks. This is all new. This used to be dirt. And I'm going to show you some pictures of what it looked like. So I don't know what year this is from. I think this is pretty recent. So you got, your turrets up here. And by the way, so great pole, great step. How do you explain that? There's this in and of itself is a huge step down. I think that's another, less certain part of this. There is a big flagpole up here. Is that the pole, great step? I don't know. But I know I've got all this imagery here that matches. And two, this area has changed so much. Maybe what he is referencing is gone. So I know that is an area that I'm not comfortable with in the solve. But there's so many other things that match. It's like philosophically, go to the shoreline, have the bridge, all the views, all that I've showed you. So this is the spot, folks, like right there. But there's a big problem with it. So somebody, I don't know who, went and probed this area. And this trail here, if I go back, is basically this trail. Okay, so that you can enter now up here, and this is all open. So this is an old sewer. I think that's been there for a very, very long time. Looks like it. And so this area in here, you can probe that pretty deeply. So I'm just going to guess this was a 42-inch probe. So this is reachable in here. Once you go off of this, like a foot or two, all of a sudden now that's kind of how deep you can go. There are tons of rocks, tons of roots. You can see they've torn these trees out and cut them. There used to be a big fence down here, and so there's remnants of the fence. I even found a sign that said, "Hey, stay off this area. We're revegetating it," from 2012, just sitting in the bushes. Okay, so like there is an area here that can be dug. It's this whole area in here can be dug. Once you go over into here, like forget it. I think that's part of the reason I'm showing you this. So this is what we're dealing with right now in this target area. It's a mess, and how are you going to get in here? It's national park. It's Presidio. There are foot patrol, like there are rangers on bikes that come through. So I think you need a like look at how dense this is, right in the spot. And I've someone, let's say, probed this area, and I don't know. You need backhoe to get in here. All right, so I want to just finish up with some of the other imagery. So to get this imagery, you must turn the painting on its side. And once you do that, you do start to see various things that line up. Okay, so here I think this is the fort and this is the bridge, right? And then over here is like the toll area. Over here are probably the batteries elevated. This I think is the battery as well that you're seeing inside of the rows. This you see it's kind of a hook. I know that's a little small. I'm happy to show you all this separately, but there's all kinds of imagery in here. But this hook with kind of a semicircle, that is actually is a shrub, a hedge that's sitting very near the roundhouse down in this area. So I was I had a picture of it and I kept looking, I couldn't find it. So you have these little hints, and I put out some things on there. People are like, you're looking at magnifying glass, and why do you need to do that? Like, you need to do it because it's giving you visual clues. Like, there are small hidden clues in here that sort of tell you, hey, you're in the right spot. And so we're picking up those things. So the other one I kind of wanted to end with was this purple one. And the purple one is the roundhouse from the top. And I think the square next to it is the battery. But when you go back and look at overheads of the roundhouse, which is the iconic, it's been there since that era was built, I think. It's a coffee house now, and you get some food and stuff there. But that used to be purple. Like, the roof and that used to be purple. Back in the 80s when Byron was there. Now, again, when you start looking at those historic aerial photos, they're grainy, they're black and white. It's hard to tell. It's white now. So if you're looking at an overhead of the roundhouse in this area, you're not going to see that as purple. But it was definitely a dark color, and I think in some of the grainier ones, it does look purple. Okay, so I think that's the roundhouse. Maybe it isn't. But, like, what is that to you? Is that part of your solve? Like, it fits right in with mine. All right. So I'm going to end with this. Of all these old photos, I spent a ton of time trying to get pictures of this area. It's changed so much. Like, this one was the 50th anniversary. I think this was in 87. And this kind of really shows the battery. And then here's the flagpole, which used to be grass. Now it's all concrete. And I even have some pictures where it kind of looks like it was almost elevated up. And so, like, is this the great pole and this is the great step? Maybe, because the dig spot is actually, like, right down in here. So, like, that's one, it's a mystery to me, but this area has changed so much. This was right before the visitor center was built. And you can see, like, especially this one, these are huge trees down here, right? Look at these big trees. Like, those are all gone now. So in the course of ripping these massive trees out and replanting this multiple times, you can just see, like, over time, the area's changed so much. I don't know. Like, part of the reason I'm publishing this is I think it's gone. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to finish putting together the New York Solve, and I will publish these together. But I really appreciate your time and considering this as an idea for what might be going on with San Francisco. So again, I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and look forward to getting your feedback on this one.